concept of God is vast and mysterious, often described as an endless ocean beyond the comprehension of finite minds. Yet in His grace, He reveals Himself through distinct attributes and marks that guide us to better understand His nature. These marks are not mere characteristics, they are reflections of His essence, drawn from the threads of creation, scripture, and human experience. By examining these 7 marks, we can begin to glimpse the heart of the divine and align our lives more closely with His purposes. The first mark of God is His holiness. Holiness is not simply an abstract quality, it is the essence of God's perfection, purity, and separateness from all that is corrupt or impure. Holiness calls us to a reverent awe, reminding us that God is utterly unlike us. It is not a barrier meant to distance us from Him, but a light that reveals His glory and invites us into His transformative presence. When we encounter God's holiness, we are confronted with the disparity between His perfection and our frailty. Yet this encounter is not meant to shame us, but to refine us, drawing us toward the life He desires for us. The second mark is God's love. Love is not merely one of God's attributes, but the foundation of His interactions with creation. His love is not conditional or fleeting, it is steadfast, sacrificial, and boundless. Through this love, we see a God who does not remain distant, but enters into the human experience, bearing the weight of our sorrows and failures. Love is the thread that ties together His justice, mercy, and grace. It calls us to reflect that love in our relationships, to love as we have been loved, and to embody the compassion that flows from the heart of God. The third mark is God's justice. In a world that often feels chaotic and unjust, the justice of God stands as a pillar of hope. His justice is not merely punitive but restorative. It seeks not only to right wrongs but to heal what has been broken. This justice flows from His perfect wisdom, discerning what is true and right in ways that go beyond human understanding. It is a justice that holds all accountable while offering redemption. It assures us that the brokenness of the world is not the final word, and that evil will ultimately be overcome by good. The fourth mark is God's wisdom. Wisdom is the mind of God revealed in the order and beauty of creation, in the intricacies of nature, and in the moral truths that guide human life. It is not the wisdom of pragmatism or intellectual superiority, but the wisdom that sees the end from the beginning. God's wisdom often confounds human expectations, for it values what the world deems insignificant and elevates what the world disregards. Trusting in His wisdom requires humility, acknowledging that His ways are higher than ours and that His purposes are always for the good of those who love Him. The fifth mark is God's power. Power, in human terms, is often associated with domination and control, but God's power is of a different kind. It is creative, redemptive, and life-giving. This is the power that spoke the universe into existence, that sustains all things, and that raises what is dead to life. God's power is not exercised for self-interest, but for the flourishing of creation. It reassures us that no situation is beyond His ability to redeem, and that no force of darkness can prevail against His light. This power invites us to live with confidence and courage, knowing that He is able to accomplish far more than we can imagine. The sixth mark is God's presence. The presence of God is not limited by time or space, but is woven into the fabric of existence. It is the still, small voice that speaks to the heart, the guiding hand that leads us through trials, and the peace that surpasses understanding. God's presence is both transcendent, beyond our grasp, and immanent, near to us in every moment. It reminds us that we are never alone, that He is with us in our joys and our sorrows, and that His presence is the source of true contentment and peace. The seventh and final mark is God's faithfulness. Faithfulness is the assurance that God is unchanging and unwavering in His promises. In a world where trust is often broken, His faithfulness is a foundation upon which we can stand. It is evident in the constancy of the seasons, the reliability of His word, and the fulfillment of His promises throughout history. God's faithfulness does not depend on our worthiness but flows from His character. It is an anchor for the soul, reminding us that He who began a good work in us will carry it to completion. Each of these marks reveals a facet of God's nature, yet none can fully capture the whole. Together they form a mosaic that points us toward the infinite mystery of who He is. To know these marks is not merely an intellectual exercise, but an invitation to relationship. They call us to worship, to trust, and to follow. They remind us that the God who created the stars also cares for the smallest details of our lives, that His ways are perfect, and that His love is unfailing. In reflecting on these marks, we are also reminded of our own calling. For just as God is holy, loving, just, wise, powerful, present, and faithful, so too are we called to reflect these qualities in our lives. Holiness calls us to live with integrity and purpose. Love compels us to serve and forgive. Justice urges us to seek what is right and to stand with the oppressed. Wisdom challenges us to live thoughtfully and with discernment. Power reminds us to use our influence for good. Presence invites us to be fully present to others, and faithfulness inspires us to remain steadfast in our commitments. These marks of God are not distant ideals but transformative truths. They shape how we see the world, how we understand ourselves, and how we relate to one another. They are the fingerprints of the divine on our lives, guiding us toward the fullness of who we were created to be. As we grow in our understanding of these marks, may we be drawn ever closer to the one who embodies them fully, finding in Him our purpose, our peace, and our ultimate home.